All right, might be live.
Awesome. All right, looks like we are up and rolling. What's going on, Josh? All right, we're all up and gone. So I think we can.
All right, I think we are officially live for the Rithmm office hours. I'm Josh Applebaum. You might see me on Sunday Sweats with my buddy James Santor or my buddy Sam Wagman, but I'm a nobody in this office hours live stream. It's all about my man, one of the sharpest guys and smartest people I know. Makes me feel dumber, which makes me happy to hang out with you today, Brian. But Brian Beachkovsky, who really is the brains behind Rithmm. So Brian, welcome to office hours. Now I came into this saying, hey, I got all these bets I want to talk about. I got rhythm system matches for Thursday Night Football. I got player props. And I was quickly told, hey, it's not all about the picks today. Today's office hours is more about how to use Rithmm to your advantage. So we're going to walk through basically when you pop open the app, which you can easily download just by going to your app store, downloading the Rithmm app, Rithmm, get that locked and loaded so you can follow along. But I think the whole point of today's office hours, which filling in for James Santor, is that we want to teach you not exactly like just come for the picks and hope they win, but teach the process of how to use Rithmm to your advantage. So, Brian, maybe if you want to just set the stage here, what's the first thing you do? Let's just act like you're not the Goodwill Hunting on the chalkboard who's the brains behind this operation. You just downloaded Rithmm. You're on the homepage. You're looking at all these different numbers and different system matches. I have pulled up a bunch of matches here for tonight. What's the first thing you do when you log in looking at games for tonight? What should I be focusing on the Rithmm app?
Awesome. Great great intro. Love it. And yeah, let's jump in with what happens there on the homepage and what you see. Well, the first thing, and this is really interesting, we've heard from people that the best predictions list, where we have because we do have an opinion for every model against every open line, can be a little overwhelming. So there are these buttons to make it easier right there on the homepage. So if you just want to see the top 5 predictions, you just hit that big button and it will show you just your top 5. And we had a great question this week about what that top 5 actually meant. And it is the ones that are dead center in your recommendation window. So we rank that based on what is right in the middle of your model's recommendation windows. Put those at the top, and the ones that are outside are below that, and then the ones that are not recommended go at the bottom. So those are the ones that are right in the middle of where your model best backtests the best. So if you are brand new, that is the easiest way to go from 0 to hero quick. Hit that button, see your top picks, and then be able to go through it. Now, personally, I have a slightly different process. I hit the games button, and then I go to that all games view. I like all games view because then I've got 3 models for each sport. I can see where the models agree, where there's difference. I've set them up to emphasize different things. And then I can see where I want to make the plays based on that, on the more information. So a lot of it depends on your experience with the app and where it goes, but that's the place to start. Look at those buttons or start jumping in right away to the predictions.
Yeah, I think, Brian, you did a great job kind of getting everyone started off on the right foot. And you said something that really kind of spoke to me, is that you use it a little bit differently. So I think, there are different ways to use Rithmm to your advantage. If you just want to follow the top recommended AI best bets, or I don't know if you want to call them best bets, but your biggest discrepancies where maybe, we say this, or Rithmm says this team should be a 3.5 point dog. They're +6 in the betting market. Therefore, I feel like I have an edge taking the points. Or if you're like me, what I like to do, Brian, is really use Rithmm as a cherry on top, or
Yeah.
basically a last vote of confidence when I'm going to make my bet. So kind of my style of betting is I'm a data-driven bettor. What I like to do is I like to look at what the market is doing. I've learned different clues over time, how to read the market. What is the line open at? How is it moved? Where are the percentage of bets in dollars? Where's the public? I want to take a contrarian approach. Where's the smart money? I'm big on betting system matches, looking at historically, okay, teams in this spot, how do they perform? Add it all up. I take a position, and then what I always do is I start with my approach, and I open Rithmm afterwards, and then that gives me kind of either more confidence or less confidence. Like if I'm looking at a game and I say, hey, I really like this dog +3, but then Rithmm says, ooh, they should be plus 5.6. That makes me less confident. If Rithmm says it should be 2 or 1, I'm more confident. So I always kind of like doing my research first and then opening Rithmm and giving me a vote of confidence here. But we have a bunch of questions here. I also want to invite everyone who's watching on the live stream on Twitter. If you have questions, this is a very rare, awesome opportunity to talk to the guy who designed Rithmm and get some insight here. But I want to ask you, before we get into some of these questions, can you talk to me, Brian, about either following a Rithmm model or creating your own model? Because I have a lot of people who I talk about Rithmm on my All Systems Go podcast, and I get a lot of questions of like, can I see your model? How did you create your model? How do you weight your model? Maybe just go through how you've created the quote unquote Rithmm AI model, and then how users can kind of empower themselves by creating their own models.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the process, the driving force of what we said is that people want a way to personalize, but don't have the time necessary to go in and build their own model. So I'll start there with how we do it, and then maybe that'll help people appreciate the not needing to go through that process themselves. So when we look to open a new sport or go through a round of a major overhaul of the modeling process, we start by just pulling together the all the stats and looking for what is predictive, where do we see things go, building out feature engineering, like normalizing stats different way, combining stats to get our own internal stuff, and trying to find where those combinations are associated with higher wins. And that process is a lot, right? Like there are hundreds of stats you can pick for any given day, and throwing them all in there can make a model so huge that it takes a long time to run. So we do go through all that work of finding what is really predictive, narrowing it down, and doing a lot of the work offline. So you can just come in and say, okay, this is what I want to emphasize in my model versus something else. Now, personally, I am into the data, so I have a premium account, and I like to also go in and pull things that are not in the baseline model and see if those help. So I'll actually go in and, like on NFL, make a kicking factor where it takes into account longest field goals or things like that to be able to add a little bit more in. But that's you just play around with it and see what works. And that's the best part, is it's so easy now. You can test things out. You wait. Sometimes a premium model can be up to an hour, maybe if it's a big one or something's going on. But there's no time lost. You're off while you're doing your other picks. That's burning in the background, and then you can look through and see if it's there. So I would just say play around with it, see what works.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And, there are different approaches to creating your own models. And sometimes as a sports fan or a bettor, you have things that, I've watched a lot of games. I feel like every time this situation arises, it's good for the over or the dog or vice versa. And then you test it and you're like, no, that's completely false. Or it's like, you're onto something. So it's always interesting to start, I think, with an idea or a theory and kind of go from there. Like, for example, WNBA Finals is tonight, game 1. I have a Rithmm model that I've created. I always look at the Rithmm one that you guys create, and then I created one that really focuses on totals, specifically like pace, three-point shooting, free throw shooting, which led me to a play here on the total for tonight's game. So the great part of Rithmm is, if you just you're a busy person, you don't have the time to test all these things. Boom, follow the Rithmm AI model. But what's really fun to me is, again, testing these theories and seeing how they turned out.
And before we move to the next thing, I want to just build on one thing you said before, which is using other processes and then coming in and seeing where they agree. We've had an awesome discussion in our Discord channel this week around looking at line movement to pick up plays, or that more traditional top-down approach, and then thinking, where does that top-down align with Rithmm to understand, has the line moved too far? Is there still some value there? But there's a lot of people who are using Rithmm as a bottoms-up secondary look when they're doing the top-down model or pick selection that way.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm glad you said that too, because like I'll give you an example from last week, Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals playing San Fran. Now the Cardinals were like a bit of a trendy dog, which I didn't like, and the line didn't really move too much. So like my market indicators were like, okay, I like the Cardinals in the points because big dogs have really barked a lot this year. I think dogs getting, I want to say 6.5 or more, covering like 75% of the time, something crazy like that. But it didn't really have the contrarian value. It didn't really have the line move. So to me, I was like on the fence. But then when I popped open Rithmm, I want to say the Cardinals were like, Rithmm had a 1.5 or like a 3, or it was a much lower number than the market. So that's a situation where I really want my process aligning with Rithmm. But even when my process doesn't, I can still, again, maybe find an advantage there based on what the Rithmm edge is. So props to you guys in coming up with those models. Brian, are you ready to take some questions from some people who are interested in learning more about Rithmm?
Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So first question here came from a user. I'm a premium user and I see the backtest results for recommended, positive DTM, and all bets. Which one should I focus on when building a model? So maybe you can tell us, what does recommended mean? What does positive DTM mean? And how do we focus on these? And what's the most important factors to answer this question?
Yeah. Okay. So the backtest results will show you by default, like if you're a premium user and have all three, it'll show you by default recommended. And that's because that is what drives the stars. So you can think of the recommended view as if you were to have put a unit down on every single recommended bet in that backtest result. That's how many bets there would be. It says underneath, NFL is something like 300, 150, 200 or 300, depending on the run, recommended bets, and then what the ROI would be for those. So that is the way to think about what your green star bets back tested at. Then if you open it up to all positive DTM, that is the DTM is the difference to market. So we look at what the payout would be times your model's predicted win probability and say, is there value there? Are you have a positive difference to market? You can think about it, if you're exactly on market, you'll lose the juice every time. So no matter what side wins, you do that a bunch of times, you'll lose the juice. So you'll see negative DTMs are when you haven't enough difference to the market line to overcome the juice. So if you were all positive DTM is if you were to put one unit down on everything that had a positive DTM, what would that look like? I like to look at that because the recommended bets are a small subset of, not that small, it's 10, 20% of all your bets, but that number is smaller than positive DTM. So if you have a model that backtests well in the recommended and then is also doing pretty well for all positives, it's going to be lower. Usually it's lower because that is a bigger window. It's the robustness of how that model is. How much is how the model is focused on that window, or is it a larger area where it has a good ROI? So I use the positive DTM as a check to say how robust is it to changes, and it also is of a good value because you have more bets there. You'll see rather than be 100 to 300, it'll be 300 to 500 bets there. So it'll be a lot more. So it's a bigger sample size to see what things will be. So I like to check them both. All games is there. You would never bet all games because that includes ones where there's no value on it all. So that's just there to see what is it doing in general. But I would focus on those two. I focus personally on recommended and then use the secondary check of all positive to see how robust those results are.
Makes total sense. And I think, one thing I've learned from James is like whenever we do the Sunday sweats, if he says like, oh, I have all these models lining up on team A, boom, gives me confidence to play team A. I wanted to ask you though, like there are situations where everything aligns perfectly and you feel really good about a bet. But let me just give you an example. I'm not going to ask you, what you would take in this game, but I'm opening my Rithmm app and looking at Houston Texans, New England Patriots. So you and I are both obviously in New England. You're in Boston. I'm a little bit on the suburbs now. But I have models that are telling me take Patriots +7, and I have a model that says take Houston -7. Now, in this situation, I think it'd be, you could look at the DTM, the percentage, go with the better system. But let's just say, for example, both these systems are strong. How do you differentiate between, okay, I have, Jekyll and Hyde on one shoulder telling me Patriots, the other one telling me Texans? How do you handle situations like that? Do you just lay off, or do you have a thought process when you have, basically battling systems?
Yeah, so I'll look and see how those two models compare on not only their back test rate, but actual track bets. And this is why getting a bunch of track bets early on will help you understand. So if I look and one has let's say an 8% ROI and the other one is like around zero, it's kind of neutral. I'll favor the one that has the positive track bet record. If I don't have that track bet established yet, that track bet record, I'll look at what the back test rates are and see is there a differentiator there. And if it's still kind of up in the air, that another way to say is it's the numbers on market and there's just a lot of variance on that, right? Like if one model favors some factors one way and it goes one way and others point the other way, maybe there's just a good market number there with high variance. So that's why you see that. Now, remember the caution, that doesn't mean stay away. So let's say you have one recommending one side, one on the other, another caution. It just means have a reason for betting it. And in that case, if I had a recommendation on each side and a third one that was laying off, I'd probably just lay off the game. I'd track both those recommended to build up my real track bet experience on those. But I may not put real money down on that because there isn't a clear signal on that on either side.
Love that answer. Let's keep going. Alec, our guy behind the, I don't know, the Vanna White behind the wall, doing all the great legwork in the back end. We got another question here because a lot of people just assume, I would think not to their fault, that Rithmm is an NFL betting app for games and models and player props. But Brian, it's not just NFL. You guys have all these different sports that are available to you. And I think one thing that I really like about being a data-driven bettor, even before I discovered Rithmm, is that if you learn how to read the market and read data, you can kind of do any sport. It doesn't matter if it's NFL, college football. I like UFC. Like I love betting UFC, and I can't tell you this fighter is, great at grappling, or I can't give you all their X's and O's, but I can tell you that they're getting 30% bets, 70% money, and the line moved in their favor. So the beauty of Rithmm, and I think the data approach, is that you can kind of apply it to all sports. So we had a great question coming up here. Number one, what sports do you offer at Rithmm? And then number two, basketball's right around the corner, NBA and college basketball. Will you guys have us covered for both pro and college hoops?
Yeah, that is a great question. And yes, we will have NBA and college basketball. In fact, college basketball is where we started. Our very first sport, our very first model was college basketball, which ties to what you were saying. The reason we chose that is there are 365, the number changes, it's somewhere around there, Division I basketball teams right now, right? So it is much easier to come up with a great line on 16 NFL games, especially when the handle's that high, than it is to come up with a great line on 180 college basketball Saturday afternoon games, which means there's more of an opportunity to find an advantage over the guy in the back of the sports book setting that line. So I love college basketball. It was where we started. It's where we continue to see some of our greatest ROIs there. So it's amazing. Using the app, what you'll see are advantages on teams you may not have even known existed prior to using the app. A lot of those smaller schools have lines, and we got an opinion on all of them because we get the data on all of them. So yes, we got college basketball covered. NBA's coming. If you go in the app right now, it still says coming soon. We're making some updates to those models to get the latest and greatest updates and techniques built into those models. We're going through final testing on those now, and that will be up and available for sure for the beginning of the NBA season and the beginning of college basketball. So that's super exciting. As everyone knows, we got college football, NFL covered. WNBA, you already mentioned, we got that one, and golf is still going. There's a lot of smaller tournaments over the fall before we get back into the big names coming into January, and we still got them. You may not know, is Ben Griffin the guy? Nick Hardy, is he the guy you should bet on? But because we have all that data, we can get you an opinion even on those the smaller name players that are still playing PGA in November and December.
Yeah, I remember I actually saw on Twitter, I believe you were joining Bostonian in the Book with Dave Sharapan and Matt Peral. And I really liked your answer when you were talking about college basketball and you mentioned how there's over 300 different teams. And I think a lot of new bettors, that's overwhelming to them. It's like there's so many games, like, there are nights, and I think with college football, it's like, hey, we got 100 games, but usually they're all Saturday. I mean, college basketball, you can easily get 50, 60, 70 games a night every night. Which can be daunting, overwhelming. But to your point, what I really like is, the fact that you're going to cover a lot of these smaller school games. Like one of my favorite angles is basically what I call the obscure line moves. Like if you go to a lot of these, different betting sites, you look at the Vegas idea rotation number. Usually it's a 3-digit number, like game 305, 306. It's Duke UNC. It's on ESPN. Everyone knows about that. That's what everyone's betting. But then you get to these like 6-digit rotation numbers, the added game, extra games that no one can even find on their app. They don't know what they don't want anything to do with them because Cal Poly against Kennesaw State, like those are games that are not sexy, are not interesting. People just completely bypass them. But what I've learned over time is those are some of your diamonds in the rough, because when I see line moves in particular on really obscure games, those really mean a lot to me, because I know it's not average Joe's drunk at the bar betting, Murray State. It's wise guys who have targeted that game and moved that number. So I'm really excited to have a full season using Rithmm, of course. I was able to meet you guys in Vegas during the Super Bowl, but I was kind of coming into the tail end of the college hoop season. So really pumped for college hoops going into this year. Let's keep on rolling, Brian, because we got a few more questions here. How can I see where my models are performing best?
Yeah.
So I got my models, Brian. How do I now track them and figure out which ones are the best?
Yeah, so this is great. And I was going to mention, this is a great tip for college basketball season as well, because like you said, you can be overwhelmed by the number of games. But because on the screen you have, if you go to the predictions tab, you get all of the open predictions. There's a filter button on the top right. So I've found, and I'll go through this in a second, how I found it, because that's the heart of the question. But I have found that one of my models, when it is over on a game, is just winning at a fantastic pace. So to be able to go through all the college football games, I just go to that page. I say, show me when this model is on the over. I use the filter on that. And then it drops it down to the 5 games this weekend that's the prediction from that model, and I can track all the recommended overs from that model. So I go from the 100 games we're going to have on Saturday to the 5 games where this model has been producing the most. That is one way when we get into college basketball that you can narrow that down from having to decide between hundreds of games a day down to the ones that you feel the most strongly about. But the question is, how did I find that overs were best? We also have that filter button on the track bets screen. So you can go through your track bets. You can open up that the custom date range, select the date going back to the beginning of the season, because by default, we only show you your last week's track bets. Otherwise, that list gets really big. But you can go back to the beginning of the season and then filter by overs. You can filter by dogs. You can filter by one model at a time. And all those boxes that tell you your ROI and record will reflect those filters. So that's where you can go in, filter for the season, drop in overs, and see how you're doing on overs. You can filter on specific DTM ranges or win probability. If you want to look at things that are over 60% win probability, you can say, how am I doing on those where it has a strong opinion? So that's the best way to find out where your models are doing well. We got some features in the foreground here of what we want to add that will put, just like those buttons for top 5 on the homepage. We'll have those down there that will auto track your filter or filter your track bets, and you'll be able to do that with a touch of a button. But until those get released, you got to open up the filter and then select what you want.
No, that's really fascinating. I wanted to ask you off the top of my head, there's a button on the Rithmm homepage leaderboard, And this was intriguing to me because basically these are, I believe, shareable systems or systems that other users with Rithmm have created. Then you can copy and basically tail them. And I also think it's funny, and I want to get your take on this, but like when I was new into betting and I learned about creating betting systems, you'd find like a good betting system, then it was like, oh, I want to keep it to myself. I don't want anyone to know about it. I don't want the books to catch on to it. It's almost like a greedy thought process of like, and I totally get it. If you have an edge, you want to keep that edge. You feel like if everyone finds your edge, you lose your edge. But I think the cool thing about Rithmm is like, it's a community. We all want to win. If I have a great model that I feel like I can profit from, I want to help you profit from as well. So I think, there's an adversarial sometimes relationship with like battling whose model is better. I want to keep my model to myself, but maybe you can speak to the thought process of how to share a model when you feel like it's shareable. Like, is it just based on, oh, it's winning at a high rate, or what goes into kind of creating a model, sharing it, and then being able to copy it and then have other people hopefully profit as well?
Yeah, this is one of those. I say a lot of our best features come directly from user feedback, and this is one because users said, "Man, I don't know how to make a great model, but I saw that they're doing really well. How do I just copy that?" So we built the copy function. The issue with the copying is we need users to be able to talk and communicate with each other, and since that's not in the app yet, we did realize that the one place you do see other users is on that leaderboard, which just overlaps with the models that you probably want to get. So we added this copy feature to the leaderboard. So if you don't know how to make one, go to the leaderboard. You can see it, you can see who's at the top, and you can change that by sport. You can change it by who's been best for the season, the last week, the last month, and then see for how many bets, right? So from 5, 10, 25 bets up to 50 bets, where is that sustained advantage by a model? And those are track bets. Those are verified, unmutable track bets in the system, so we know that those are real. It's not like going on Twitter and seeing that somebody says, "Hey, I've been 20 of 24 for the last however long," and they have a link to their Google Doc, which you have no idea if they've just been manipulating and deleting stuff out. These are things that can't be changed once that track bet is in and locked in for 5 minutes. So what we want to be able to do is exactly what you said. So now it's only on the leaderboard can you copy, but if somebody wants the model that I'm using and I'm just not on the leaderboard yet, and quite frankly, it's hard to get on the leaderboard if you have a totals or models or totals or spreads, because the money line payouts have been just ridiculous this year with, like you said, 70% of the big dogs winning in the NFL. But we're going to add that in where I can connect with you, and there'll be some sort of link or some sort of code that you'll give, and I'll be like, okay, that's the code for my model, and then it'll copy over. So those are the kinds of things we're doing, is to continue to build in that community, because like you said, there's such a strong feeling when people are like, I'm winning with that. James, I know, is he gets hit up all the time about his Jimbo Slice model. So that is the big thing that he's looking at. And we just want to make it easier for more people to share and be part of the Rithmm community.
Yeah, and to your point, if you scroll down on the app, there's going to be a button there at the bottom, join Discord, which I think is a great feature as well, because if you are interested in Rithmm, you're probably a data-minded person who's interested in talking to other data-minded people. So that's a great opportunity with that Discord channel to kind of communicate with other Rithmm members. So kudos to you on that one. Got another question here for you, Brian. If I have a DTM of 16% with caution on an under, and another model has 14% DTM on the same under, why is the 14% a green star, but the 16% is a caution? So Brian, that's confusing there, but maybe you can parse that out for us.
Yeah. So the heart of the question is this: I got a bigger difference to market on this model than I do on this one, but it's not recommended, but this one is. So I think that's the heart of the question: is wouldn't you think a bigger difference would be recommended? Well, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, because we create the recommendation window for each model during its backtest. So we take every backtested game and understand what the predicted score is, what the actual score of that game was, and we find the region that has the minimum distance between the predicted score and the actual score, and at the same time has the maximum return on investment for the bets within that region. So sometimes a model, because they have different influences in there, will have recommendations and a strong predictive power between, let's say, 9 and 15%, but another one will be between 17 and 25%. So those windows are actually based on that model's performance in that backtesting training step. So they won't always be the same. And this is different. Early on, before we had that next level of personalization, we were looking at all the aggregated data across all the models to find where those windows are. So if you're old school or OG, you know that we had those windows set at 15 to 25% for everybody for a while. But now it's actually personalized based on your model specific prediction versus the real score of the game in your backtest results. So it's a next level of personalization. But that means sometimes the windows won't line up between models.
Great answer on that one, Brian. And I wanted to mention too, just in terms of like player props, and I'll throw this at you just to see if maybe you realize the same thing. But like one way that I use player props with Rithmm to my advantage, obviously I'm looking for discrepancies where, you guys are recommending a receiver to have 45 yards and his over under is 30 and a half, something like that, and go over. But I'm having pretty good success on targeting basically lower tiered players. This is something that James and I talk about quite a bit. And I think there's a good thought process and a money-making opportunity behind it. Because if you look at the NFL, and, I get a lot of like PR people sending me stuff each day, different sports books. This is the action we're taking in at DraftKings or BetMGM or FanDuel. And you'll always see, like, and the PR people will tweet this out because it's interesting information, but it's always, Patrick Mahomes over passing yards, Travis Kelce over receiving yards, Justin Jefferson over receiving yards. It's always the star players to go over their number. Now, I get why that's the popular bet. Public mindset is I want to bet on a good star player to perform positively and sweat an over. That's exciting. That's fun. The kind of cautionary tale there is that the odds makers know this. So they're going to shade a lot of these, star players to their over. So a lot of times, if you're playing a star player to go over, you're kind of getting the worst of the number. That's a little bit inflated. Also, I've been talking to, in the past, different odds makers about the difficulty they have setting accurate numbers for lesser tiered players. Like, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's easier, to find a, Aaron Rodgers, what his passing yardage should be, but maybe it's not as easy to figure out what the third string running back is going to be, or the fourth string wide receiver, or the backup tight end. So what I've been having success with Rithmm is bypassing the big names. Give me the backup running backs. Give me the backup players. Like, I'll give you an example. Justice Hill for the Baltimore Ravens. Like, this guy only gets 5 or 6 carries a game, but I feel like his over-under rushing is always like 10 and a half, 13 and a half, 12 and a half. He's been cashing quite a few overs for me. And I think that is combined with the Rithmm model of, hey, Justice Hill, we're predicting closer to 20. So I know I'm kind of long-winded question here, Brian, but do you feel like that's an advantage here, kind of focusing on the second tier players because you have this great data in terms of their predictions versus maybe not being popular in the market and the odds makers having difficulty setting accurate or, kind of honest numbers for these guys they don't really know as much about?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say I not only agree because of my heart, I can tell you I see it every week in the NFL, and even going back to NBA in the playoffs last year, I was on Hauser overs all the time on the Celtics run. And I loved it because of two things. The model predicted it, but there were multiple game states that would lead to the Hauser over, because either they were getting blown out and he was going above his projected minutes because they were resting the guys, or they were blowing the other guys out and the other side was beginning to rest. So there were multiple ways that you could see the bench players getting more times than the standard projection. And we were seeing that happen time and time again. So it was less of a rare event. So I was seeing value all the time on the bench player overs and hitting that. And it was pretty good. So that I love it, especially if you have confirmatory reason why you expect there to be a greater than normal chance for them to get greater playing time or situational play in the NFL, Or if you think that they're going to get 1 or 2 snaps but never actually get the ball, is a great way to play the unders with that second tier too. If you think, hey, this is going to be a close game, they're going to be out there on the field, but they're not going to put the ball in that guy's hand. They're going to keep it in the primetime player's hands, and likely to go under, and the model's on that side anyway.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think there's great opportunities in the NBA, especially. Like, I remember it was a couple years ago in the finals, PJ Tucker, his like points, rebounds, and assists, it would always be like, I don't know, 10 and a half. And I felt like he cashed that one like at a ridiculous rate. So I'm right there with you. Brian, we're kind of wrapping things up here. I always want to remind people to download the Rithmm app. Everything we're talking about, it can seem abstract, but when you're holding the app in your hand, it can really feel a lot more intuitive. You can follow Brian, of course, at Beachkovsky on Twitter. I'm at Josh_insights. Of course, every Sunday, join us for the Rithmm Sunday Sweats, 11 a.m. to noon, myself and James Santor. But Brian, anything else you want to leave with the viewers and watchers here, or are you ready to sweat some games with me tonight? How you feeling? Any last words before we wrap this up?
No, I all of your questions I think were awesome. If James never comes back, we're going to be in a great place doing this. So thank you so much for filling in. I will say this too. Many of your questions anchored in what's the way to do it, and my answers were always anchored in just try it out. It's a very low risk way to do things. 7-day trial. You see what's there, start tracking bets, see what happens. It's going to be the easiest way to just get involved is to do it that way. Second thing, we are working right now on, and this is going to be some inside information, on tracking props, because that is huge, but you'll be able to see what their ROI and win rates have been week over week and build that out. We knew people wanted props. We pushed that out real quick because of the structure and the resulting. It took a little bit for us to catch up on the tracking, but that is coming in the next few weeks. So get ready for it. It's going to be amazing. And then on to basketball. It's been a long time, but I'm excited. That is my most profitable time of year.
And what do you think, Brian? Maybe we'll rent out a suite at the TD Garden, have a Rithmm party, watch the Celtics, bet on Sammy Buckets over points, rebounds, assists. But that'll be really fun. And Brian, it's been a pleasure, man. Best of luck. Hope to see you soon. And thank you all for tuning in. And of course, make sure you download that Rithmm app.
Awesome. Take care.